welcome back for day 2 of our article discussing animal testing. I'm Kat.
I'm Reese.
And I'm not an animal, even though my name is Kat.
Yes, and we're both kind of animals, I suppose. But
I mean, yeah, we're humans are animals.
Not in the way that we're talking about today.
Right.
Animal testing. Yesterday we talked a bit about how, we can test on animals to maybe improve and create vaccines.
Yeah, exactly.
That can cure humans of certain diseases, which is a good thing, but the testing itself is a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about chimpanzees as well and how, because they're so close to us genetically, they make really good test subjects.
Yes, they do. But unfortunately, they can't tell us that they want to undergo a test. They can't consent.
No. Well, let's talk more about vaccines then. So vaccines are those shots you get that stop you from getting a disease. We talked about them yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in school, I got the TB vaccine, which is tuberculosis.
I can't remember if I've ever gotten that one.
It was an enormous needle that they shove into your upper arm. And it is so painful.
Ouch.
But it does stop you getting tuberculosis, which is arguably worse than a jab in the arm.
I think the last vaccine that I got probably was updates on maybe tetanus or something like that, which is a disease you can get from dirty metal or injuries that get dirty or mice, something like that. So it's very nasty. You should definitely get vaccinated against tetanus.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, we are going to talk more about animal testing and the question of, do we need it? Of course, that's a big question. We can't really answer it, but there might be developments that make it less necessary for us to do tests on animals. So we're going to talk about some of those today. Let's go ahead and look at it.
Reading.
Animal testing. Do we need it? Even though we can achieve many results for humans from animal testing, there are always two sides to every coin. Sometimes we learn, sometimes we fail. In the treatment trials already done for HCV, there has been a 95% success rate in patients. This is one positive result of using chimpanzees for medical tests, and humans benefit greatly from this research. But will there be a time when we have learned enough to stop using chimpanzees for tests? That time could be now. Studying the life cycles of HCV can now be done in a laboratory using human cell cultures in petri dishes. With all that we've learned from chimpanzees and other medical fields, we may not need to do more live testing. Others argue that a vaccine would take longer to create because of the need to see reactions of medicine in a living being. We could continue to use human cell cultures, but it would take much longer and more lives may be lost at the same time. There is no clear winner in this debate, so it's up to society to try and find some equality between animal and human testing.
So today's article begins with, even though we can achieve many results for humans from animal testing, there are always two sides to every coin. Sometimes we learn, sometimes we fail.
So what does it mean there are two sides to every coin?
I like that phrase. It essentially means that every topic or everything has two different perspectives that you can take on that thing. So when we're talking about animal testing, it means that there are some good reasons why we test on animals, but there are also bad things about it too.
Yes.
Like how a coin has two sides, this subject also has two different sides.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, like they say, sometimes we learn, sometimes we fail. If you learn from animal testing, I guess, if you can save millions of lives, that would be a good thing. But sometimes we fail might mean that sometimes there's no good reason for it, or sometimes it's just not necessary. It's not needed. So the article goes on to say, in the treatment trials already done for HCV, remember we were talking about hepatitis C virus yesterday, HCV, there has been a 95% success rate in patients. Well, that's very good.
It's very high.
Yeah. So they've been doing treatment trials on patients, which means they're now doing human trials, which means they've probably moved beyond animal testing because they will do animal testing first and then they will test on humans. So now we're saying there's a 95% success rate. Now, rate is our first word here, and it means the number of times something happens or is done during a particular period of time, so it's the number of times that they had a success while they were testing patients of HCV. So you could also think of it as a percentage. I said 95% success rate, which means that only 5% of the treatment trials failed. That means it had a high rate of success. It had mostly successful times of being tried. We can also use the word rate for things like rate of failure. That means how many times did something fail? Or rate of speed, how fast was it? That's how you can use the word rate. Or rate of exchange, like currency. Like how many dollars can you get in Taiwan for $1 US? It's usually about 30. So anyway, here's an example for rate. The rate of success for this operation is 97%. So you're likely to be fine afterward. There's only a 3% chance you will not be fine.
Well, that's a pretty good rate. The article tells us more. It says this is one positive result of using chimpanzees for medical tests, and humans benefit greatly from this research. Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable that this is good for humans.
It is.
And without that testing, that good result might not happen. But does it justify the testing?
Yeah, does the end justify the means, as they say?
And I don't think it's an easy question to answer.
No.
But let's talk about a few more words here. We've got 2 vocabulary words, the first of which is benefit. The verb to benefit means to receive an advantage or profit from something. If something benefits you, that means that thing gives you good things or good feelings. We can use this word in so many different contexts. Your body benefits from eating healthy food, like vegetables. You can benefit from school by learning new information. The word benefit can also be a noun, and the noun form is the name of those good things that you get or gain. So here's an example with the noun. One benefit of living in Taiwan is that we are safe from coronavirus. So
yeah,
being
we haven't
safe,
had an outbreak.
We haven't. It's been wonderful. And here's an example sentence with the verb benefit. When a good leader is the president of the country, the whole country benefits.
Yeah, so benefit. Well, humans benefit from the research that is going on. Now, yesterday we talked about experiments, we talked about science. Research is another one of these. So research is a noun that is basically what scientists and academics, which is people who work at universities, do. And what students do too. So you have to read many different sources, you learn information from them, or you might do a study on people or an experiment to get data, to get information. Research can also be a verb. You can research things. So that's just very simple. So let's look at an example as a noun. The scientists' research on the strange city in the desert showed that it was from a culture that existed 3,000 years ago.
So cool.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, then the article continues with this. It says, but will there be a time when we have learned enough to stop using chimpanzees for tests? That time could be now. Wow, that's a hopeful phrase at the end of that sentence.
It is, yeah. It means that we might be able to stop using chimpanzees for these kinds of tests. I wonder what makes it that way. Well, the article is going to tell us right now. Studying the life cycles of HCV can now be done in a laboratory using human cell cultures in petri dishes. All right, so we've got a lot to talk about here, but let's first talk about a life cycle. Life cycle is basically, like if you've ever heard that song, The Circle of Life.
Elton John.
Yes, it's that. It's from The Lion King. Now, life cycle includes how somebody is born, they grow up, they live, they reproduce, which means to have babies, and they die. And then that baby continues that cycle. This is what every living thing goes through. It's a cycle because the living thing can reproduce or make copies of itself, and it happens all over again. So that's why it's a cycle.
That's why we're here.
That's exactly right. We wouldn't be here if the life cycle didn't work.
Yeah. And our life cycles have been uninterrupted for millions of years.
Yeah,
well,
it's crazy to think about that.
Our ancestors. It's cool.
All right.
All right, let's talk about science. We have 3 different scientific terms to talk about here, so get your textbooks out.
Laboratory.
Laboratory or laboratory.
Yeah,
is,
laboratory.
Yeah.
Don't listen to my silly pronunciation.
Is laboratory incorrect?
It reminds me of a cartoon.
Dexter's Laboratory.
That's right, laboratory. So that's the right way. Or lab, just lab.
That's what we're going to explain. So first we have the word laboratory or laboratory, a long word, but we can make it easier and shorter by using the word lab, L-A-B. A lab or laboratory is a place where scientists work and do experiments. A lab is usually full of science equipment and strange and dangerous chemicals.
Ooh. Or maybe not, but you know.
not that exciting.
Yeah.
Then we have cell cultures. So a cell is a tiny part of a living thing, like a plant or an animal. And a cell culture is a group of cells that is growing under specific conditions, usually as a part of a science experiment. Scientists study and research cell cultures to learn about things like diseases or just how life works.
Right. So it's not that the cells have their own, culture. They don't have a country. They're not like having, social events or something like that.
They're not wearing special clothes eating special food.
That's not what it means. It means like a group of cells that are growing in a certain condition. Yeah.
Well, then we finally have the word petri dish. I think in the UK we would say petri dish as well. So petri, either is fine. A petri dish is a small plastic bowl which is used in science labs. We usually grow cell cultures in petri dishes.
Yeah.
So the petri dishes and cell cultures are often kept in clean and safe places so that the experiment can have reliable results.
Right. If you've been in a science class where you do cell cultures, you've probably used one of these. Or maybe you, took some pond water and looked at it under a microscope. You might have used a petri dish there too.
It's just a fancy word for a small plastic bowl.
Anyway, so now we know, you can basically put human cells and grow them in a dish and then do tests on those.
Right.
They're not a person.
Yeah.
They're not an animal. They're just living cells from a person. Yeah. So what it says now is, with all that we've learned from chimpanzees and other medical fields, we may not need to do more live testing. Yeah. So we're doing testing on live cells, but not living beings that can feel pain and
cells,
stuff.
I think, don't have feelings. Like cells can't feel pain.
No, so they don't have nerves. They don't have brains. They react to things like in a survival mode, but that's it. All right. So now we're talking about medical fields. So we're talking about an area of study or work. This is not a field like a long, flat piece of ground. Your field is what you know the most about and what you can offer your knowledge or skills in. So when we talk about the medical fields, people who work in the medical field might be doctors, nurses, medical researchers, healthcare officials, people like that. And if you're a patient, then you benefit from people in the medical field. Of course, there are different subfields in each field. That means smaller fields that are part of the big field. Or they're called specializations because you have special knowledge in that part. For example, my field is linguistics, and my specialization is English language learning materials design. That means I write tests and articles for you guys.
Very specific field.
Yes, exactly. So now here's an example of field. So she is described as one of the leading experts in her field. That means that this woman knows a lot about what she studies or what she works in. And basically, people look to her to understand the most advanced knowledge about that thing.
Right. She's not standing in the middle of an open grassy area.
She is outstanding in her field. I had to do it. Okay. So, we've learned from other medical fields, and we've learned from the tests that have been conducted on chimpanzees, which might mean that we don't need to do any more of them.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, then the article tells us more. It says, others argue that a vaccine would take longer to create because of the need to see reactions of medicine in a living being.
That is a good point.
It is a good point, and it's the other side of the coin. You know, it's saying that this is a good reason to test on animals because we can see these reactions. So we have some words here, argue and reaction. Let's talk about the verb argue first. To argue means to give reasons or evidence to support an idea, action, or theory. So we often argue with people to try and make them believe us or think the same way as us because we think we're right. The article said that some scientists say we don't need to do animal testing anymore, but other scientists argue that a vaccine could take longer to create if we stop animal testing. So here the word argue is showing us that there are people that disagree with each other, and each side of the argument, which is the noun of argue, has points and evidence to support their idea. We can also use the word argue to talk about a verbal fight you might have with somebody. That's when you shout and use mean words when you're angry with them.
How dare you? Why would you do this to me?
Yeah, that's a different kind of argue. So here's an example sentence using argue. Some people argue that we should have 3 weekend days instead of 2.
I would argue that point.
I would argue that until I die.
The scientists are arguing that we need to see reactions of medicine in a living being. So what is a reaction? When you talk about the word reaction, it's 2 parts. It's which means back or to go back, and then action, which is a thing that you do, an act. Now, something that happens because of something else, that's a reaction. So if Reese called me a mean name, my reaction might be to get mad, or ignore him, or I might cry, or I might call him a mean name back.
I would never do that to you.
I know, I'm just kidding. All right, now, but we're talking here more about like a medical or chemical reaction. That means that when you put 2 substances or chemicals together, or if you give somebody a medicine, like you make it into contact with their body, you see what they do to each other. So if an animal or person gets a kind of medicine, what will their body do? Researchers are looking for these reactions. Here's an example sentence. Setting the metal on fire created a reaction that turned the flame bright pink. We were talking about that yesterday.
That might be the magnesium.
Yeah, I think so.
So cool. Such a cool reaction.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, reactions to medicine, we have to consider that. Like, if you put, for example, if you grow human skin cells in a petri dish, and you try a medicine to, like you cut them and then you try a medicine to make them, grow back and heal. But what if that medicine hurts you somewhere else? What if it gets into your blood and poisons you? What if it hurts your stomach? What if you're allergic to it? And what if it, affects your nerves? So you have to think about all the different parts of the human body, or an animal body, I guess. And you have to think about how that medicine is going to work on them, not just one part.
It's very complicated stuff, and that's why these scientists and researchers study these things for years and years and years. That's why, even when we've tested a vaccine and it works 95% of the time, it's still not ready to release to the public yet because it still might be dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. You need to make sure that it's not going to hurt anyone, or that if it does hurt anyone, that it can be controlled.
Yes, exactly. Well, the article continues here and it says, we would continue to use human cell cultures, but it would take much longer and more lives may be lost at the same time.
Right.
Oh, well, that's a good argument, I guess, for using animals.
I mean, I guess it's a question of do you want humans to die from disease, or do you want animals to suffer and die from testing? It's neither one is a good answer.
Yeah.
I think most people would say they value human lives over animal lives. There's no right answer.
Yeah.
And the thing you can do is just to reduce the amount of harm you are causing to any living thing. Yeah.
I'm hoping as science, gets better and more advanced, that maybe we can find ways to not have to do it on animals, like is happening in the article. We can test it on cell cultures and improve our own technology.
Yeah.
Well, what is this phrase, at the same time? It's pretty self-explanatory, but let's talk about it. The phrase at the same time means simultaneously.
I feel like that's a harder word.
It is a harder word. Yeah, let's explain what it means. If you use the phrase at the same time, that means two or more things are happening at one time. Usually, we put the phrase at the end of the sentence like this. I eat food and watch TV at the same time. So I'm doing both of those things in one time. But we can also put the phrase in the middle of the sentence, between the two different events. So, for example, James was listening to music at the same time as the teacher was teaching class.
All right, so as I said, the article says the same thing. There is no clear winner in this debate. So it's up to society to try and find some equality between animal and human testing. I kind of question this conclusion. I don't think it's up to society. I think it's up to the medical community.
Yeah.
We can't really decide. We may want that no animals be tested on, but it may not be a fully good thing.
I think this is a question that people who are educated in that field need to answer.
Yeah. It should be up to them. It's not up to us. We are not doctors. We are not animal researchers. We can't answer that question. We can only say what we think. Yeah. So we have this last phrase here, it's up to X. It's up to somebody. It means basically the responsibility for this question is on society. And I say, is it really? Is it though? But if I say hey, Reese, what do you want to eat for dinner tonight? And you say, it's up to you.
That means I'm giving you the responsibility of making that decision.
Please, you decide. I don't want to.
Or if you're...
or I'm letting you decide.
If you make a big mess in the living room and your mum says, it's up to you to clean up this mess.
Yeah, it means you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's up to you. It's your responsibility. It's your problem.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of our two-day article on animal testing.
Yeah.
We haven't an answer for the question, but we did talk about some good points.
Yeah.
And you guys can maybe do more research and find out what you think about it.
Yeah, I'm sure that you guys have your own thoughts on this, your own opinions, your own points of view. And you can definitely do some more research on it too. So let's go on and go to our For You chat right now.
For You chat.
All right, our question today is, I would say it's not a hard question because I think most people would have the same answer. What if someone did an experiment on you without you agreeing to it? How would that make you feel?
Bad.
Yeah. Yeah, bad.
In one word, please don't experiment on me without my permission.
Yeah.
I might end up getting hurt or upset depending on what kind of experiment it might be.
Even if it wasn't a harmful one, you should ask people before you do something.
It's also very illegal to test on people without their knowledge.
It used to not be illegal. They used to do tests on people without telling them, without informing them, but now rules and laws in the scientific community make it so that you can go to jail if you test on people without their knowledge. I think of the guy who did the DNA sequencing on the twins in China, the twin baby girls, and he's in jail now because what he did was illegal. He didn't get their consent to tweak their DNA because they were not even born yet. They could not give consent. They couldn't agree to it.
There are some other famous experiments in history, like the Milgram experiment as well. Yeah. And you guys can think about this question too. How would you feel if someone experimented on you without telling you? And maybe you can do some research into experiments on the internet and find out and make your own decisions about that.
And talk about how can people agree? Who can agree and who cannot agree to do something? I think this is a really important question, not just for science, but for anything. You should always be able to agree to what happens to you, I think.
Consent is the word.
Yeah.
Consent.
That's right. So that's all we've got for today. And we hope you've learned something interesting and hope it gives you some good things to discuss. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye. Animal testing. Do we need it? Even though we can achieve many results for humans from animal testing, there are always two sides to every coin. Sometimes we learn, sometimes we fail. In the treatment trials already done for HCV, there has been a 95% success rate in patients. This is one positive result of using chimpanzees for medical tests, and humans benefit greatly from this research. But will there be a time when we have learned enough to stop using chimpanzees for tests? That time could be now. Studying the life cycles of HCV can now be done in a laboratory using human cell cultures in petri dishes. With all that we've learned from chimpanzees and other medical fields, we may not need to do more live testing. Others argue that a vaccine would take longer to create because of the need to see reactions of medicine in a living being. We could continue to use human cell cultures, but it would take much longer and more lives may be lost at the same time. There is no clear winner in this debate, so it's up to society to try and find some equality between animal and human testing.
Vocabulary Review. Rate. A normal resting heart rate for an adult is about 60 to 100 beats per minute. Benefit. When a government gives money to its public schools, many children benefit from having better supplies. Research. Our research in computers has allowed us to create some computer programs that are smarter than most adults. Field. The field of science is always getting larger and more advanced because of the progress we make as humans. Argue. The lawyer argued his point about being able to turn right on a red light. Reaction. Hunter had a bad reaction to seeing the movie because it contained people using needles.
智慧小补帖
Laboratory. Cell culture. Petri dish.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net